Joseph had always thought of himself as a reasonable guy. He wasn't the jealous type, nor did he mind Megan, his wife, having close friends. In fact, when she introduced him to Rachel, her best friend since college, he figured this was just another extension of her life he could embrace. At first glance, Rachel seemed pleasant enough. She was witty, had an infectious laugh, and shared countless inside jokes with Megan that Joseph could never hope to understand. But as time went on, Rachel's presence in their lives became a lot. Like a whole lot. For instance, Rachel didn't just stop by occasionally. She practically lived at their house. It wasn't unusual for Joseph to walk into his living room and find Rachel sprawled out on their couch, eating snacks like she owned the place. Megan thought nothing of it. "Rachel's family," she'd say with a shrug, as though that explained why Rachel had commandeered their Netflix account and their last pint of ice cream. Joseph tolerated it. Mostly. He was willing to put up with Rachel's loud stories and habit of commenting on his every move because Megan loved her. But things started to get weird when Rachel began inserting herself into their personal moments. Like the time Joseph planned a romantic anniversary dinner for just him and Megan. Halfway through, Rachel showed up with a bottle of wine and declared herself the evening's entertainment. Megan, bless her overly kind heart, welcomed Rachel with open arms. Joseph, on the other hand, started to wonder if this was his life now. Still, he chalked it up to Rachel being overbearing but harmless. Until she moved in. It happened so fast that Joseph didn't even have time to protest. Rachel's divorce had been messy, and Megan, ever the compassionate one, offered her their guest room for a few weeks until she got back on her feet. That was 6 months ago. At first, Joseph tried to be understanding. Rachel had just been through a rough patch, and he figured she'd be eager to find her independence again. Spoiler alert, she wasn't. Instead, Rachel spent her days lounging in their home, scrolling through her phone, and loudly analyzing reality TV shows while Joseph tried to work in his upstairs office. The guest room? It looked less like temporary housing and more like Rachel's personal storage unit, with shopping bags and clothes spilling out into the hallway. Joseph's patience wore thin quickly. The tipping point came when he reviewed their monthly credit card statement and noticed a string of unexplained charges, fancy dinners, spa days, and what appeared to be a pair of ridiculously expensive boots. "What's this?" he asked Megan one evening, holding the bill like it was evidence in a criminal trial. "Oh, Rachel needed a pick-me-up," Megan replied, not even looking up from her book. "She's been feeling down lately." Joseph stared at her, dumbfounded. "So we're funding her retail therapy now?" Megan's eyes narrowed. "She's my best friend, Joseph. You wouldn't understand." Oh, he understood perfectly. Rachel had become a freeloading nightmare, and Megan was enabling her. But Joseph, ever the peacekeeper, bit his tongue and tried to make the best of it. That is, until Rachel decided to cross a line he couldn't ignore. It was supposed to be a quiet weekend. Megan had gone to visit her sister, leaving Joseph with the rare luxury of a Rachel-free house. Or so he thought. On the morning Megan left, Rachel suddenly announced she wasn't feeling well and wouldn't be going on the trip after all. "Don't worry about me, Joseph," she said dramatically, clutching her stomach like she was auditioning for a soap opera. "I'll just stay here and rest." Joseph knew better than to argue. He just nodded and retreated to the couch, determined to salvage his alone time. But Rachel had other plans. A few hours later, she emerged from her room wearing a short skirt and one of Joseph's old hoodies. "You don't mind, do you?" she asked with a sly smile, gesturing to the hoodie. "Megan said you were going to donate it anyway." Joseph barely glanced at her. Whatever. Rachel plopped herself onto the couch next to him, much closer than he liked. He shifted uncomfortably, but she didn't take the hint. Instead, she leaned in and asked, "Why are you always so serious, Joseph? You need to relax more." "I'm relaxed," he replied flatly, inching away from her. Rachel laughed. "You're cute when you lie." It was official. Joseph's patience had run out. He stood abruptly, muttering something about needing fresh air, and left the house. Sitting in his car, he tried to process what had just happened. Was Rachel flirting with him? No, it had to be a misunderstanding. right? Wrong. Joseph didn't return home until late that evening. By then, Rachel had retreated to the guest room, and the house was mercifully quiet. But the unease lingered. Over the next few days, Rachel's behavior escalated from subtle flirtations to outright provocations. She'd find excuses to touch his arm, compliment his appearance, or corner him in the kitchen with unnecessary small talk. One afternoon, while Joseph was in his office, Rachel barged in unannounced. "You've been working too hard," she said, leaning against his desk with a glass of wine in hand. "Why don't you take a break? Let me help you unwind." Joseph stared at her, his patience officially worn thin. "Rachel, I think you should leave," he said, his tone firm. She pouted. "Oh, come on, don't be so uptight." "I'm not kidding. This is my home, and I've had enough of your behavior." For a moment, Rachel looked genuinely taken aback, but she quickly recovered, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Fine, whatever. You're no fun anyway." She sauntered out, leaving Joseph fuming. When Megan returned from her trip, Joseph wasted no time confronting her. He recounted everything: Rachel's inappropriate comments, her invasive behavior, and how uncomfortable she made him feel. But to his disbelief, Megan brushed it off. "That's just Rachel being Rachel," she said dismissively. "You're overreacting." Joseph couldn't believe his ears. "Overreacting? She's crossed every line imaginable, and you're okay with that?" Megan sighed. "She's going through a tough time. Can't you just cut her some slack?" Joseph's frustration boiled over. "No, Megan, this isn't about cutting slack. It's about respect. For me, for our marriage, and for our home. If Rachel can't respect that, she has to go." Despite Joseph's firm stance, Megan remained unconvinced. "Joseph, she's not staying forever. Just let her get back on her feet. It's not that big of a deal." "Not that big of a deal?" Joseph repeated, his voice rising. "She's flirting with me in my own house. How is that not a big deal?" Megan waved her hand dismissively, as though brushing off a minor inconvenience. "Rachel is just flirty by nature. She doesn't mean anything by it. You're reading too much into it." Joseph felt his frustration boil over. Flirty by nature or not, it's completely disrespectful. And if you can't see that, then maybe the problem isn't just Rachel. That statement hung in the air, heavy and uncomfortable. Megan stared at him, clearly not expecting him to go there. But before either of them could say another word, Rachel walked into the room. "Am I interrupting?" she asked innocently, though her smirk suggested she knew exactly what was going on. Joseph shot her a glare. As a matter of fact, yes. Rachel shrugged, grabbing a bottle of water from the kitchen counter. "You two really need to relax. You're both so uptight lately." She turned to Megan. "You've been so stressed. Maybe Joseph could use a little distraction, lighten the mood." Megan laughed nervously, as though Rachel's inappropriate comment was somehow meant as a joke. Joseph, however, was done playing along. "Enough," he snapped, his voice cold and firm. "Rachel, pack your things and leave." Rachel blinked, clearly taken aback. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Joseph said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I've had enough. You need to go." Megan stepped in, her voice tinged with panic. "Joseph, wait. Let's talk about this. Rachel has nowhere else to go." "Not my problem," Joseph replied, his gaze unwavering. "She's crossed every boundary, and I'm not tolerating it anymore." Rachel's smirk returned, though it looked more forced now. "Wow, Joseph, you really are as uptight as Megan says." Joseph turned to Megan. "This is your best friend. If you want to defend her behavior, fine, but she's not staying here another day. Either she goes or I will." Megan's jaw dropped. "You don't mean that." "I've never been more serious," Joseph said quietly, but the steel in his voice was unmistakable. "Before you find out what happens next, please subscribe to the channel." The room fell into a heavy silence as Joseph's ultimatum hung in the air. Megan looked between him and Rachel, her expression torn. Rachel, on the other hand, seemed almost amused, like she was enjoying the chaos she had caused. "You're overreacting," Megan finally said, her voice quivering. "This isn't fair, Joseph. You're putting me in an impossible position." Impossible. Joseph's voice was calm but cold. The only thing impossible here is me tolerating this any longer. I've asked you to respect me, Megan. You've ignored me. Now I'm done asking. Rachel leaned casually against the counter, watching the exchange with a smug grin. Relax, Megan. He's just being dramatic. Give him a few days to cool off. Joseph turned to her, his expression unreadable. Rachel, you've caused enough damage. It's time to leave. But Rachel didn't move. Instead, she crossed her arms and said, Megan, do you really want to let him control everything? This is your house too. Joseph laughed bitterly. Oh, I see. You're trying to turn this into a power struggle. Let me be clear, Rachel. You're not just disrespecting me, you're disrespecting Megan too by putting her in this position. Megan hesitated, glancing nervously at Rachel. Joseph, can't we just talk this through? We've talked enough, Joseph said firmly. I've made my decision. The next morning, Rachel's belongings were packed and sitting in the hallway. Joseph had done it himself, leaving no room for negotiation. Megan sulked at the kitchen table while Rachel fumed silently, her usually confident demeanor replaced by a simmering resentment. This is ridiculous, Rachel muttered, dragging her suitcase toward the door. She turned back to Megan. You're really letting him do this? Megan didn't respond, her eyes glued to the floor. Joseph stepped forward. This isn't about letting me do anything. This is about boundaries, something you've clearly never understood. Rachel rolled her eyes and walked out, slamming the door behind her. The echo of the door reverberated through the house, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Megan finally looked up at Joseph, tears welling in her eyes. Are you happy now? She's gone, but so is any chance of fixing this. Joseph sighed, his voice softening. Megan, this wasn't about me versus Rachel. It was about us, our marriage. I needed you to stand by me, to see how her behavior was affecting everything. But you didn't. Megan didn't say anything, and for the first time, Joseph wondered if their marriage was more fractured than he realized. A few days after Rachel's departure, the house remained quiet, but the tension between Joseph and Megan lingered. Megan seemed distracted, always on her phone, avoiding eye contact, and finding excuses to stay busy. Joseph couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. One evening, while Megan was out running errands, she accidentally left her phone on the kitchen counter. Normally, Joseph wouldn't invade her privacy, but the growing suspicion gnawed at him. His gut told him there was more to the story. The phone buzzed. A message preview appeared on the lock screen. It was from Rachel. Hope he's not being too uptight. Keep me updated. Joseph's stomach churned. What the hell does that mean? He muttered under his breath. He stared at the phone, debating whether to dig deeper. Finally, he shook his head and put it back down. No, he told himself. I'm not going to stoop to this. But the seed of doubt had been planted. The tension between Joseph and Megan had been suffocating ever since Rachel left. While Megan tried to act normal, Joseph couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that something deeper was going on. Rachel's behavior, Megan's defenses, and the strange message he'd seen on her phone. It all pointed to something bigger. One evening, Megan left her phone charging on the nightstand and went to take a shower. Joseph paced the bedroom, debating with himself. His gut told him to leave it alone, but his instincts whispered that the truth was right there, waiting to be uncovered. Finally, he picked up the phone and unlocked it. To his surprise, the passcode hadn't changed. His hands trembled as he opened Megan's chat with Rachel. What he found made his blood run cold. Rachel. I can't believe he didn't fall for it. What a waste of time. Megan. I know. I thought for sure he'd at least look tempted. He didn't even flinch. Rachel. Men like him are impossible. If he'd just taken the bait, it would have been so much easier to make him the bad guy. Joseph's heart pounded in his chest as he scrolled further. The messages painted a chilling picture of their plan. Rachel had been tasked with seducing him, creating the perfect excuse for Megan to call him unfaithful. Once he was branded as the one who strayed, Megan could suggest an open marriage as a way to fix things. Megan, I don't know what to do now. He's too stubborn. Rachel, this is falling apart. Rachel, relax. Just shift the narrative. Tell him you're unhappy. Make him think it's his fault. Then suggest the open thing as a solution. He'll cave eventually. Megan's reply stung more than anything else. I hate this. I wish he'd just go along with it so we wouldn't have to do all this. Rachel, you're doing this for both of you. He'll thank you later when he sees how freeing it is. Besides, it's not like you've done anything wrong. He's the one who's too closed-minded. Joseph felt his stomach turn. Every message confirmed his worst fears. Rachel's obnoxious behavior hadn't been random. It was calculated. Megan had not only known about it but had willingly played along. They had tried to trap him in a lie that never existed. Then came the final message that sealed it. Megan, I just need more time to figure out how to bring it up without making him suspicious. Rachel, you better hurry. He already seems on edge. If he catches on, we're screwed. Joseph photographed all of this texting so that Megan couldn't deny it afterward. Then Joseph locked the phone and placed it back on the nightstand, his mind spinning. The shower turned off, and moments later, Megan stepped out of the bathroom, towel wrapped around her hair. She smiled at him. Everything okay? Joseph forced a calm expression, though his heart pounded in his chest. Yeah, everything's fine, he said, his voice steady. Joseph had spent the entire night replaying the messages in his head. Every word was like a dagger to his chest, a betrayal he couldn't ignore. By morning, his resolve was solidified. This wasn't something he could forgive or forget. Megan had crossed a line, and there was no going back. That evening, Megan returned from work to find Joseph sitting at the kitchen table, her phone in front of him. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with quiet fury. Joseph? She asked cautiously, setting her bag down. What's going on? He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. Megan hesitated. Why are you acting so? Sit, he repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. Megan slowly lowered herself into the chair. You're scaring me. Joseph slid the phone across the table. I read your messages with Rachel. Her face drained of color. What? What are you talking about? Don't play dumb, Joseph snapped. I saw everything. Your plan to use Rachel to seduce me, to frame me as the unfaithful one so you could push me into an open marriage. You really thought I wouldn't find out? Megan's mouth opened and closed, words failing her. Finally, she stammered, It wasn't like that. Don't lie to me, Joseph's voice thundered, slamming his fist on the table. Megan flinched. You let that woman cross every boundary, disrespect me, our home, our marriage, all so you could manipulate me into some twisted fantasy. Do you even hear how insane that sounds? Tears welled up in Megan's eyes. I didn't know what else to do, she cried. You're so closed off, so stuck in your ways. I was afraid to bring it up because I knew you'd say no. So you decided to gaslight me instead? Joseph shot back. You didn't even have the guts to have a real conversation. You chose deception and betrayal over honesty. I made a mistake, Megan pleaded, her voice breaking. I was scared, Joseph. I thought if we tried something new it might make us stronger. Joseph let out a bitter laugh. Stronger? You destroyed any trust we had. Do you even hear yourself? This isn't about making us stronger. This was selfish, plain and simple. Megan reached for his hand, but he pulled away. I can fix this, she said desperately. We can fix this. No, Megan, you can't, Joseph said coldly. You didn't just cross a line, you burned it, and now you're going to face the consequences. He stood abruptly, towering over her. I want you out of this house, tonight. Megan's eyes widened. What? Joseph, please. I'm done, he said firmly. You can pack your things or I'll do it for you. Either way, you're leaving. You don't mean this, Megan whispered, tears streaming down her face. I've never meant anything more in my life, Joseph replied, He grabbed a suitcase from the hallway closet and tossed it onto the floor beside her. "Start packing," Megan sobbed as she began gathering her belongings. Joseph watched her silently, his heart hardened against her tears. When she finally left, her suitcase dragging behind her, he closed the door and locked it, the sound echoing like a final punctuation mark on their marriage. The next morning, Joseph wasted no time. He contacted a lawyer and began the process of filing for divorce. As he explained the situation, his lawyer nodded grimly. "You're doing the right thing," the lawyer said. "This kind of betrayal, it's not something you can just move past." Joseph nodded, his resolve unwavering. "I just want it over with." By the end of the week, Megan was served with divorce papers. She called him repeatedly, leaving tearful voicemails begging for another chance. But Joseph didn't answer. He was done. This wasn't a mistake he could forgive. The courtroom was eerily quiet as Megan took the stand. With tears in her eyes and a quivering voice, she painted herself as a victim of Joseph's alleged cruelty. According to her, she had endured years of emotional neglect, culminating in the night he threw her out with nothing but a suitcase. "He was always so controlling," Megan sobbed, clutching a tissue. "I just wanted us to grow as a couple, to explore ways to bring us closer. But Joseph, he made me feel like I was suffocating." Joseph sat stoically at the defendant's table, his lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia, flipping through her notes. When it was Joseph's turn, Patricia wasted no time dismantling Megan's narrative. "Your Honor," Patricia began, "my client has endured a calculated betrayal. We have evidence showing that Mrs. Simmons and her friend Rachel conspired to manipulate Mr. Simmons into an open marriage against his will. Mrs. Simmons' own messages reveal a coordinated effort to gaslight my client, provoke him, and frame him as unfaithful to justify her desires." She handed a folder to the judge, containing screenshots of the incriminating texts. "This is not the behavior of a victim, Your Honor. It's the behavior of someone who prioritized deceit over honesty, all at my client's expense." Megan's lawyer tried to object, but the judge silenced him with a raised hand. After reviewing the evidence, the judge turned to Megan, her expression stern. "Mrs. Simmons," the judge said, "while I sympathize with your claims of marital discord, the evidence presented suggests a significant level of manipulation on your part. This court does not condone such behavior." Megan's face turned crimson, her bravado crumbling under the weight of the evidence. "In light of the circumstances," the judge continued, "this court finds no grounds to grant your request for a disproportionate division of assets." The judge then moved on to Joseph and said that Joseph had also behaved incontinently when he kicked Megan out of the house. "Given the mess this marriage is in, I'm letting you all know. The marital property will be divided equally." Joseph exhaled, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. Megan looked as though the air had been knocked out of her. In the months following the divorce, Joseph's life took a remarkable turn. Free from the toxic cloud of Rachel and Megan's manipulations, he threw himself into his work, finally earning a promotion he had long been vying for. With his newfound financial stability, he moved into a modern loft downtown, a space that felt like his own sanctuary. Joseph also rediscovered his passion for running and joined a local group where he made new friends who shared his interests. One evening, as he jogged along the waterfront, Joseph paused to take in the sunset. A smile crossed his face. He didn't feel anger toward Megan anymore. Instead, he felt gratitude, grateful to have escaped a situation that no longer served him, and to have the chance to rebuild his life. Megan's life, however, took a less glamorous turn. Under Rachel's continued influence, she tried to dive into the social scene Rachel had promised would be liberating. But Rachel's advice, as always, was anything but wise. One night, Rachel convinced Megan to attend an exclusive party at a mansion, claiming it was filled with influential people. In reality, it was a poorly disguised pyramid scheme meeting. Megan, under the impression she was networking, accidentally got roped into presenting a product pitch in front of a room full of strangers. Rachel, conveniently occupied, disappeared, leaving Megan alone to fumble through a speech about miracle diet pills. The audience quickly realized she had no idea what she was talking about and began laughing. Videos of the embarrassing moment spread on social media, earning Megan the humiliating nickname Pyramid Queen. Months later, Joseph heard about Megan's escapade through a mutual acquaintance. He couldn't help but chuckle. It wasn't out of spite. He had moved past that. But there was a certain poetic justice in seeing Rachel's toxic influence come back to haunt them both. As Joseph sipped his coffee in his loft, surrounded by the life he'd rebuilt, he felt nothing but contentment. The past was behind him, and the future was his to shape. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to the channel. I wish you a great mood and good luck.